In the past recent years, apart from athletics and tourism, one of the other things that is making Kenya really known is cyberbullying. There's so many Kenyans who are actually proud of that title, of being one of the biggest cyberbullies in the world. And I find this to be so laughable because the same Kenyans that are proud of this, they're the same ones complaining about how the Kenyan government is always using violence, police brutality to try and silence and intimidate Kenyans when they speak up about how the government is incompetent. And actually this behavior has been so normalized that people just laugh about it. When someone comes online and is like, oh, I was bullied by Kenyans. You always see a lot of Kenyans in those comment sections being like, yes, you deserved it and we are going to do worse to you. It's like they're really proud of being called bullies. And actually, to remind ourselves, bullying is intentionally hurting, harming and intimidating people that you consider to be weaker. So this is something that you were doing knowing very well that it's going to be hurting the other person. And one of the things that causes this type of violent behavior in a lot of Kenyans is one-dimensional thinking. This is something that is actually part and parcel of Kenyan culture. There's always been this idea that you can only be one thing, you can only believe in something in one way, you cannot have multiple points of view. This is something that has always been reiterated, whether it's at home and more so in schools, and this is because the education systems that we have, they still follow the colonial curriculum. Although we do have independence on paper, a lot of the systems that we still have are still very much colonial, because a lot has not been done in decolonizing the systems that we have, including education. So even when you look at the education system in Kenya, it still glorifies the West. It's all about looking at white supremacy as the blueprint, as the goal that you should be going for. But most importantly, it is an education system that does not encourage thinking. You're just supposed to do what you're being told. You're not supposed to think for yourself. If you're the kind of person who's a thinker, who's always asking questions, you are labeled as a troublemaker. This is why even while we were in school, they were always pushing for uniformity. Everyone wears uniform, everyone shaves their head. You weren't even allowed to wear lotion because apparently you think you're better than teachers if you wear lotion. So using Vaseline or things like Armis were the only ones that were allowed in the school that I went to. And even when I went to a high school that allowed us to have our hair, they also had rules about which hairstyles you're supposed to have, whether it's cornrows, and also how the cornrows should look like. It was all about uniformity. And these are the things that are affecting the online culture that we're seeing a lot of Kenyans exhibiting, or how they're reacting to other people that do have points of view that are not considered the norm in Kenya. And this is why some of the key themes that you see in response to a lot of conversations in Kenya is reductionism, dismissiveness, a lack of curiosity, and of course coupled with threats and intimidation. Because a lot of Kenyans feel if you're saying something that has not been approved by the status quo, suddenly you are putting the entire culture in peril. Unfortunately, because a lot of people are brought this way, it means that they have this lack of curiosity, which leads them to have a lack of exposure. That means that if you are a content creator online, you are someone that tends to have different points of view from the status quo, you're going to suffer a lot. I mean, one of the things I find so interesting is this idea that a lot of Kenyans have that if a woman says that she is child-free, apparently it means that she has had a lot of abortions and that's why she's deciding to be child-free. Like, where does that come from? Of course, I do understand that Kenya is a deeply patriarchal society that doesn't believe that women can have the choice over their own lives. But I think to even just come with that extreme point of view, that someone deciding they do not want children must mean that they've had numerous abortions and now their uterus doesn't work and that's why they've decided to be child-free. Something else related to this, of course, about women is that if you're a single woman, if you choose to be single, apparently it means that no man wants you. And that's why you're pretending that you're choosing to be single. I find this so interesting. This just goes to show you that the roots of patriarchy are so deep because people cannot fathom that a woman can have a choice. Like for them, that is not even an option. So they have to come up with all these crazy stories. It's one thing to think like that for yourself, but to go ahead and bully women who are child-free or who have decided to be single and they're sharing that online, you're going ahead and insulting them and sending death threats, telling them that they deserve to die just because they do not want to participate in the role that has been defined for women by the patriarchal society. The fact that that has been so normalized that you see it in almost every female content creator's comment section, I find it absolutely absurd. And this is one of the things I don't understand when people talk now about how, oh, critical thinking is gone. Critical thinking has never been approved by the mainstream. There is no time in history, especially the recent history, where critical thinking was considered cool, because critical thinking is a direct threat to patriarchy. The other reasons why you will see a lot of cyberbullying from a lot of Kenyans, it's because they're using it as a coping mechanism. It's no secret that Kenya, like many other parts of the world, is experiencing a rising cost of living and also a rise in unemployment rates. And this has a lot of impact on the self-esteem of people and the self-worth, because for a very long time, society has always told people that your worth as a human being comes from the job that you're doing, from the title that you have in your job. And so if you do not have that, does it mean that you're a failure? And again, society teaches people to not want to be failures, that failure is a bad thing. And so all these complex feelings that a lot of people have about how they're not able to afford life anymore, and also the fact that a lot of people are losing their jobs, they're getting retrenched, others are not getting jobs even after getting out of school, because a lot of people do not have the tools to navigate the complexity of the situations they are finding themselves in. Bullying other people becomes a coping mechanism, especially when they come online and then they're seeing that there are people who are living their best lives. They see people who are buying the most expensive things, basically living the lives that these people would want. The first reaction for them is to bully these people. They do so because they think that is going to make them feel better about their situation. Yes, maybe you will feel better temporarily, but at the end of the day, you're the one that is a clown, because there's so much content on the internet, but the one that you're choosing to consume is the one that is making you feel bad about your own situation. I mean, we can talk all along about algorithms and all that, but at the end of the day, you're the one that is training your algorithm to bring you the content that you're consuming. So yes, if you find yourself consuming content of people who are splurging, buying whatever they want when you cannot even afford food, I mean, surely you're the one that is making your own situation worse, because you're choosing to watch that content when no one is forcing you to. And then instead of taking responsibility for putting yourself in such a situation that is causing a lot of mental stress, you're choosing to bully that person, to insult them. And of course, we can understand that the world is not fair, but you also need to understand that the world is not fair to everyone, or for the majority of people. Yes, people could be posting on social media about their perfect lives, but you do not know categorically about the material nature of their own lives. You sending those insults might actually be doing something really bad, but of course you do not care, because you think that your own feelings are valid. You think that this other person who does not even know you is responsible for the situation that you're in. If only people had a lot of energy to hold their leaders accountable than insulting people on social media, maybe the world would be better. Maybe you would not be facing unemployment. Maybe you wouldn't have to worry about the cost of living if you used your time and energy and your veracity to hound the leaders that you elected the same way that you want to insult and threaten people on social media. The other reason why a lot of Kenyans are always cyberbullying people is because there's no consequence for it. A lot of people feel like, oh my God, I can use the little power that I have of being anonymous. I mean, you're not anonymous, but they think they are anonymous, and they're like, oh my God, I can make the life of this person so horrible and nothing's gonna happen to me. Of course, they don't care about how that is going to be affecting the mental health of the person they are threatening, because of course they do not care about the people online. They dehumanize them. They do not see them as human beings. They're like, oh, this person is on a screen here, I can do whatever I want. They think it's so fascinating that this is a crime they can get away with, because oh my God, who's gonna come for you? Especially in a country like Kenya, there's no infrastructure to surveil cyberbullying, and also there is no proper means of prosecuting. I've seen a few content creators and influencers going to court when someone has bullied them, cyberbullied them, but a lot of times nothing really happens. It's a long process that is also very costly. That's why you'll find a lot of Kenyans will just do it because they think it's fun. They can get away with it. I mean, the more I'm talking about these things, the more my brain is just creating parallels between the behavior of everyday people and politicians, and I'm finding it so funny. I can just hear a lot of laughter in my head, because I'm like, oh, the behaviors that a lot of politicians are always exhibiting are the exact ones that everyday Kenyans are always exhibiting, especially online. But it's funny that a lot of Kenyans don't want to even see that. And I've spoken about this numerous times in numerous videos, and one of the pushbacks I always get, especially from a lot of Kenyans, like, no, you cannot compare everyday Kenyans with politicians. But I'm sorry, you can. And that's probably why you hate those politicians so much, because they are a perfect mirror of you. And then of course, one of the key things that creates the cyberbullying culture, and this is probably where we should start, is the fact that Kenyan culture has normalized violent culture, and it is everywhere, in all the institutions, whether it's religion, whether it's schools, whether it's family, whether it's relationships. For a lot of people, bullying is actually learned behavior. And I know there's some Kenyans who are always being like, oh, insulting people and bullying them is a way of us showing love. Yes, there's an aspect of how insults can be a way of social bonding, but that only happens with the people that you know. When you start insulting people you've never met, people you don't know, and you're threatening them and you're telling them that you'll kill them just because you don't agree with them, that is bullying. And unfortunately, that is actually the experiences that a lot of Kenyan children have in their own homes. You disagree with a parent and they'll talk about how you are better off dead. They'll talk about how they regret giving birth to you. That is actually emotional abuse and psychological abuse. And one of the key things actually in Kenya's violent culture is the fact that emotional and psychological abuse and violence is not considered as abuse and violence. And that's why a lot of Kenyans think that, oh, they're not violent because they're not physically violent. A lot of parents have always been abusive and violent because they do not know how to express their own complex feelings that they have about parenting. And they do not know how to do that because they do not want to be vulnerable. And they do not want to be vulnerable because Kenya is a patriarchal society and vulnerability is seen as weak. No parent wants to be seen as weak. No teacher wants to be seen as weak. No pastor or priest in the church wants to be seen as weak. So even when they do something wrong, they're going to gaslight everyone. And if you try to point out how wrong they are, you're the one that is going to face the music. They're going to abuse you in all manner. And if you don't listen when they abuse you psychologically and emotionally, well, they're going to go on to physical violence to teach you a lesson. So children learn from parents, from teachers, from everyone else that being abusive is something that is normal, and they grow up and they become abusive adults. Even in the workplaces, abuse is considered normal. And this is why if you want to change the Kenyan government, it really has to start from our everyday lives. It has to start from the culture that we have. It needs to start with us starting to see ourselves as human beings and accepting that vulnerability is part of being a human being and not being weak. Everyday bullying in the governmental context becomes unchecked power, a lack of accountability, and intimidating anyone that tries to speak out about how the government is failing. These are things that we are seeing constantly. I always tell people around me, and I will always say this, and I truly believe in this, if you feel entitled to insult and intimidate people on social media just because you don't like them, then unfortunately your own leaders are also entitled to insulting and intimidating you just because they don't like you or they don't like what you're saying. There shouldn't be double standards. You know, the funny thing is that the subtext of this bullying behavior is patriarchy. Of course, I do know that majority of Kenyans do not want to let go of the patriarchy. They would rather die than let the patriarchy go, even when the patriarchy is doing a lot of harm to them, because unfortunately a lot of Kenyans are addicted to being oppressed, and they also want to have the power to oppress people they consider weaker in their own lives. And this is exactly why, even if you dream about it, as long as these structures exist, having better leaders is just going to be a fantasy that will never come true.